Now that the working environment has changed so much and we're all working in a totally different situation, decision making just got harder. And you might have seen that in yourself or in others, or you might be thinking, what? Why would decision making be harder? Well, we make decisions based on our past experiences, and when the environment we're in, both ourselves and our teams, changes, then it's harder to make good decisions because we're influenced by our previous experiences. Now, a lot of those previous experiences are going to be very useful, but what about the parts that aren't? They can be hindering us. So I'm going to do I'll do a few videos on this, trying to give some techniques and things to help with this, but this first video is just going to be explaining the situation. So if you haven't read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, find the time to do that while you're remotely working. It will literally make you a clearer and better decision maker. So how does it do that? Well, one of the key things that he identifies in the book is, and through his research, is the concept of system 1 and system 2 in the brain. So system 1 is basically your autopilot. It's the things you can do without thinking about. Once you learn to drive a car with a manual gear shifter, you don't have to think about changing gears. You just do it. Whereas when you first learn, it will be system 2. You're having to focus on it. So your brain likes to stay in system 1 as much as possible. For biological reasons, it's less expensive on energy, basically, and so it can make decisions easier and quicker. Now, that's useful for a lot of things. However, it can be not so useful when you find yourself, for example, in a new environment, like you're working from home and the whole team is disparately working from home. Now, let's say you're used to working from home. You were once, say, a remote agile coach. Now you're like, oh, all right, I'm just back to where I was. That's fine. So it's going to impact you less. However, having the entire team remote that you're working with is also going to be a change, which will influence the way you do things. Whereas if you've always been in a environment where the team's always there, this can be even harder. So what's interesting is the system 1 influences us when we're on autopilot. Unfortunately, the same mechanisms that drive system 1 in the brain influence us when we're making decisions, engaged logical decisions as well. So basically what happens, neurons in your brain form connections when you learn things, and the more you run those connections, basically the faster they get. Your brain lays down this fatty tissue called myelin, which basically insulates them. And a well-insulated, myelinated connection can run 10 times as fast as a weakly myelinated connection. So those channels in your brain just run faster, which means when you are trying to make these well thought out rational decisions, you still have these patterns in your brain that whenever they can run, it's easier to run through those neural networks. So you get influenced by those past decisions. The only way to really make decisions that break out of that mold is to both surface the underlying beliefs that you've got about the way things are, try and identify what those are, the assumptions you're making about how things need to be able to make clearer decisions about how they can be instead, and still get to the outcomes you want or get to new outcomes, and to be able to logically challenge those assumptions, look for alternatives to them. So what I'm going to do is go through a few of these quick little videos each morning and post them up with a few techniques. So the first one is you're trying to make a decision and you're thinking, well, I need to do this or I need to do that, and you can get caught in this bind of, well, it's just this versus that. The first step is to draw back a little bit and identify why you want each of those things in the first place. What's the underlying driver you've got for each? So that's sort of engaging system 2 to a greater degree. You're identifying, well, I want to take this action because I'll get this outcome, or I have this driving need, or whatever it is. Alternatively, I'd like to take this action, assuming the actions are mutually exclusive, or both of them take your time, so you've got to do one or the other, because I want this need. So the first step is about identifying those. Why are you trying to make take these actions in the first place? And what you can easily identify there is, oh, well, actually, I could just do this third alternate action and get both, or it doesn't, conflict with these things. So that's the first one. The next one to look at is, when looking at this, well, to get this outcome I want, or this important need I've got served, I need to do this because. What is the because there? So that's all the beliefs and those assumptions I talked about, and we need to be able to get clear on why is it that you think that in order to have great team culture, I have to be in the office, because you got to be around people, you got to see the reaction on their face, you've got to be able to give them that physical pat on the back, you've got to be able to catch them doing the right thing. All of those reasons. I mean, they're all legitimate reasons, but what are they? So that we can identify alternatives. You need to identify them to be able to solve, basically. And then finally, the most interesting one is, what about all of this in others? So it's hard enough doing it for ourselves, but doing it for others is even more tricky. So you might have one side of this where you want to do this action, somebody else wants to do a different one. What are each of your goals on that? What are you each trying to get to? And again, what are the assumptions that you're making? And much more difficult, what are the assumptions that they're making? What are their beliefs, or that sort of thing? Now, that can be actually huge in software, because you've got a customer who says, I need this feature to do X, Y, Z. If you can effectively identify why they want it in the first place, and you can create functionality to deliver something which solves their problem in a more elegant way, a more effective way, whatever it is, then that can be immensely powerful for how effective your software can be, and how much of a basically solution it becomes for your customers. So that's huge as well. Over the next few mornings, I'll post up a video of each of those three, me just talking like this, explaining them, how you can use those techniques to make better decisions in this different environment that you're in, and make better decisions in any environment that you're in. Hope they're useful.